Y'all ready to take an in-depth look into our brain? What's up, guys? My name's Varric. So as promised here, we are going to be delving more so into our inner world and what it's really like today. But first off, I'm going to answer a few questions that were left on our previous video. So first off, are there systems that don't have an inner world? And yes and no. Like, inner worlds can be kind of like blackness or nothingness or kind of a void. So in essence, like, no inner world, but yeah, there can be ones that don't have inner worlds. Is it possible for someone who has aphantasia to enter the inner world? I'm not exactly certain what aphantasia is. We've had a video saved on our watch later list of like what aphantasia is, and we haven't gotten around to watching that yet, so we're not exactly certain what it is, but I'm sure if it's like a processing disorder, then totally. Alters can have any sort of like different processing abilities or different sensory abilities, and that's totally normal. Could you be in the inner world without realizing it's not the real world? Or could a part that has never experienced the inner world get access to it and not realize what it is? I think so. For people who've never experienced like the outer world, for an alter that just like appeared in the system and they're only in the inner world so far, they could probably just think that that's the regular world and everything. So yes, I believe that they could. Does it look like the outer world? Can you touch and feel things? Is there weather? Do alters choose where they go? How do alters get from one place to another? Are there animals? Are there NPCs? I'm just gonna kind of go through a list on this one. It doesn't look exactly like the outer world. Like, there's completely different geography. Oxygen is a metal in our inner world. There's no oxygen in the air. It's more so sulfur, ammonia, and nitrogen, which is super weird, and that's probably why things are a little more flammable there. But yeah, oxygen is a metal, and that's been like a constant source of people being weirded out when they get in here and people mention oxygen in the air. They're like, oh my god, we're breathing metal. And everyone's like, no, oxygen is a gas here. It's chill, dude. Don't freak out. And then, yeah, there's weather. There's totally differing forms of weather. Mostly it's kind of chill, like where most people are. It's kind of like the Pacific Northwest. So there's rain and there's snow in the winter. And there's a lot of snow on the mountains usually. Do alters choose where they go, and how do alters get from one place to another? They usually choose where they go. Me personally, I chose where I live. I will point that out on the map here in a minute. And yeah, we get from place to place by walking, cars, if you have cars, and a lot of people fly. Most of us are non-human humanoids, so a lot of people have like wings, and we get from place to place typically by flying, or if you have telekinesis, you can kind of just like hover. It's pretty cool. And if you can't fly, you can get someone to fly you there. Like, you can get someone to carry you from place to place if they're not busy or whatever. Are there animals? Yeah. Yeah, there's animals. There is some pretty wild wildlife here. There's something called a whaling dog, which is, it's like a dog, but imagine it without hair, and imagine it having like a mouth nested inside its regular mouth. Like 2 mouths, and their howls sound like people screaming, hence the name whaling dogs. You only see those in the east, and thank God, because those creep me out. There's a lot of deer, which is our main food source. There's deer everywhere. Like, we don't have cows, we don't have like a lot of livestock things. That's actually illegal in the inner world. You can't raise livestock and slaughter it like you do here on Earth. I sound like an alien. But yeah, most of us live more of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle where we hunt our own food, and that's really nice. I honestly like that. And there's like these other things, we call them sky mouths. Think something about the size of a Walmart that looks kind of like a manta ray, and it has like, it flies kind of like this, but then it opens from wingtip to wingtip into a gigantic mouth, and it will just like scoop up flocks of birds. And those are terrifying, but those are only in the far east. You can see a trend that the east is usually like the scary and weird places, but they're not that bad. If you stay away from them, you won't get chased, and it's pleasant. And are there NPCs? Yeah. We call them holograms. They're kind of just like, you know, non-playable characters in video games. Like, you see people walking around in Skyrim, for example, and they've got like they're kind of plain, bland things that they say, and you can't really interact with them a lot, and they're kind of just there to fill the space. And so yeah, there's tons of those. There's cities full of them, and among those, there are some that can stand out more, like they have more of an aura around them. And those people are the ones that can become alters if the situation requires it. For example, there was this guy in the West, and he's a cop, which is interesting because cops are very different in our inner world than they are out here. They're a lot more aggressive and they're a lot smarter. Like, if there's somebody who was being abused behind closed doors, the cops would know that, and they would literally, like, fly through the city. They're speed flyers, so they are really fast. They will, like, go through and, like, attack the abuser and incarcerate them, or make sure they don't abuse people ever again. Which is why we really appreciate the cops in our system, because while they're not, like, they're still cops, but they really stand for what's right instead of cops out here where they kind of just shoot first and ask questions later, which is totally whack. Cops are better in our inner world. And the last one is, do all your parts/alters live in the same inner world, or do some live in separate inner world/continents or countries? We have a bunch of people spread out over the whole inner world. Like, I'm going to literally carry my tablet over and point things out on this big old map that I've got on the wall over there, and I'll have little slides in between places, like saying who lives where. And yeah, people are all over this place. And then there's also like a landmass that kind of floats out in space, but we haven't gotten around to painting that yet. It's where Logan is from, but we don't have many main altars that live there. It's kind of more so full of those holograms. So yeah, let's get into this over here. Alright, so this is our map of the inner world. We intentionally painted the outside areas kind of a gray to kind of represent the dissociative barriers and things we haven't discovered yet. So zooming in here, first off we have got the West. And this is where most of the action goes down. It's basically like a mountain, and like imagine if there were two mountains but one got cut off midway. It's like that, but on the stump of the mountain, that's where a city is built. And like this is where a lot of people live. Now I live down here, so you've got a mountain range, a smaller mountain range, and in here you've got basically a mini version of that. Kind of a valley, and a bunch of people live here. A lot of people recently moved, which is pretty nice, but I live right about there. I know it's kind of tiny to point out, but this thing is huge. Now, crossing the coast, this is the far west. They are across the ocean. This here, which we haven't painted in yet, is a massive tree. You can see this thing from outer space. Now, people from here are generally more reserved, kind of timid. They're really good at like tactician things and battle planning, and that's what they're known for. A lot of people recently moved down to that little mountain valley thing, and that's who's all over there. Now here we've got something called Utopian, and that is, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's a very utopian type city, and everyone who goes there kind of goes there to live out the rest of their life in peace. And down here we've got the polar opposite of that. This here is Dystopian. This is Dystopian, and this is where you want to go if you want a chaotic fun time full of, like, gunfighting in the streets, and duels, and drugs, and all sorts of stuff. People usually go here to kind of get themselves out of a fog, or if they're in a stasis, they kind of go in here to snap out of it. It's kind of fun. I've never been there, and I don't think I plan to. I've heard it could be really fun, but I've also heard it's extremely dangerous. This here is an island. It's where angels used to live. Now, angels for us, They're kind of like what demons are out here. They're really aggressive, really violent, and just kind of uncool all around. But they moved to over here. This is where the angels currently are. They've got this city going on about there, and which we're pretty thankful for because they're very far from everything else, and it's very nice. Here we have the east. It's kind of hard because their land, their place is really interesting. It's like a stone pillar, but with arcs of stone that kind of go around it, kind of like a flower almost. The East used to be known for being really violent and scary and kind of like Nazi Germany, not gonna lie. The East used to think that they should rule all the land, and they got into this big fight with the West because they were like, oh yeah, divide and conquer, get all of our power everywhere. And the West wasn't about that, and neither was the Far West. So they staged kind of a rebellion about that, which got the West banned to their continent, and they couldn't come back for a long time. But now that they can, that's why some are moved down here, and that's pretty nice. Then up here, we've got the North. It's kind of like a big mountain with a curved mountain range, and then the city on the inside here. This is where it's happening. This is where all the cool stuff is, apparently. New altars are there, and it's starting out to be a really good place. It's kind of been built from the ground up, which is why we're also interested in seeing how it turns out. Below here, we've got a city. It's shaped kind of like an X with walls that divide places. It's kind of like, let's see, it divides regions, and I've never been there personally, so I'm not exactly certain what the differences between these places are, but apparently there's differences. I don't know. Now here with this little square, this is an enchanted labyrinth. So within about a 200-mile radius, if you try to pass it like that, you will be almost magnetically drawn towards having to go through the thing, which is pretty inconvenient, but at the same time it's kind of nice and kind of fun to go through all that. I don't know, I kind of like mazes, so I wouldn't have a problem with having to go through that. Now going over here, you've got these two mountains. These used to be over here. They used to be right up there, but Farkas moved them because he used to be the one to rule the East who wanted that divide and conquer thing, but that didn't go over well. He got overthrown by Sujin, and in a rage, he literally took his mountains and moved them up there, and, well, that's kind of petty. It's like, that's his house, that's where he lives, so it makes sense. Then down here we've got a desert, and there should be a dot right about there. That's a city where Rem and Sargon and a few others live. And that's pretty nice. Now here is the Far East. The paint's kind of dark, but it's kind of like this triangular shape. This is where most of the people who love the ocean live. They're kind of standoffish, they're a little bit timid, but they're good people all around. And then down here we've got some different zones. There's like humans that live around here, and there's also zones of zombies, honestly. It's a virus called HRV, standing for Human Reanimatory Virus, and that's where Blaze is from. He grew up in one of these areas, but then moved to Dystopian, where he kind of made a life for himself, and then moved up and is in the East currently. Then down here is where angels used to be, but now I think they've settled with being over there, which is pretty great. We've got a few islands here which need to be repainted, and we've got this thing up here, which also needs to be redrawn. It's a temple. where Catriona lives, and she's a star mage. She really communicates with the stars and feels the energies there, and she lives up there with a few other people. And now this up here is where Sphinx lives. He really likes to be away from everybody. He lives in this mountain here with a bird army. He's got an army of birds, and he really likes them, and they like him, so I guess that's pretty good. Then up here we've got a little castle, which Kate built. She hasn't been up there in a long time, so it's kind of just been sitting there, but it's still there. I think she uses it for like a vacation home. And then here we've got a building, which is where the priests live, and they also have an outpost there. Priests are kind of like, if you've ever seen Assassin's Creed, it's like Assassin's Creed mixed with the Illuminati. They work in pairs, and they ride motorcycles, and they kind of keep the world in balance. Like, they keep things from going too bad. If there's a corrupt politician or something, they'll take him out. They make sure that everybody adheres to the no livestock laws and all sorts of good stuff. They sound pretty scary, but they're actually really good. And then down here we've got another little city. I think Soldier is from here, and it's kind of just like a regular city. There's lots of brick buildings. I know there's some guy that makes clocks, but he's not an altar. And we don't know a lot about this place yet because nobody's really been there, but it's there. Then here we've got another mountain range, which is where one of Farkas's outposts was, like back in the day when he was all like divide and conquer. He kind of forgot about it. I know there's people that live there, but nobody's really been there in years, so I don't know. We should probably re-explore that. Now this here is the biggest lake. It's gigantic. And what else? I know there's another really gigantic tree here, and it's got fruit the size of cars, and that is pretty awesome. So most of this is also pretty unexplored. We have got a lot of exploring to do. Yeah. There's also this little land space down here, which is where Dexter spent a lot of time when he was in basically the witness protection program, because he was one of Farkas's right-hand men, and he did not want to be part of that, and so he kind of got out of there and lived there for a few years. But he's also in the same force that I am, but in a different place now. So this is a little crash course on our inner world. And before I forget, I should probably mention that the inner world dynamics are kind of run by a few families. At this point, I think there's 6. The heads of these families are really important altars, and usually more altars split off of them, but only to an extent. There's usually about 8 or so altogether in these families, and they run the regions. Like, each region, like the West, Far East, etc., is run by a family. And, well, except for the East. Because Sujin took that over, and he's running it pretty well, so the Eastern family's up in those mountains. And these families all see each other as kind of like siblings, but, you know, like half-siblings, because they're all pretty related, but not inherently so. Which is why we wouldn't see people from, like, different families really in relationships, because they're all kind of related in some manner. So, yeah. That's just another little thing I thought I'd throw in here, you know, right after I finished filming and realized that I forgot something. So this has been a little crash course on our inner world. If there's anything else you'd like to know, feel free to leave any questions. I'm probably going to start like a Wattpad account or something to write down like all the history and stuff that's gone down over time, because there's a lot. Like, you already heard a little bit about like the rebellion and everything, and the East trying to take over stuff, and all the reactions of that, but I would like to start writing more about it. Maybe even make some history book, you know, label it as like a fantasy or something. Nobody has to know what's going on inside our heads. This is fine. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you all in the next video. She never leaves my bed. She kind of just exists here.